So here's the challenge. By the end of this video, I want to get this magnificent beast up here because it's flat. The slight issue is that there's a cliff in the way, and I'm definitely going to need a running vehicle to get up here. Probably one with four-wheel drive.
And of course, the battery is flat, so we'll need the service vehicle. Let's just assume it's not starting because all of this is unplugged. You know, like the clock and the radio. Right now, we're going to ignore the fact that the best 4x4 by far doesn't work and fix some other problems. Like this back door that someone has swung off, bending the hinges and leaving a 2-inch gap at the top. It's also a bit rusty underneath. So I made a trip to the mighty Mamaku, population also home to the nicest wrecking yard in the country, that happens to specialise in Land Rovers. There they are, like gnomes in the forest. I got a bunch of stuff that needs restoring. So, obviously a replacement door. They did have a couple of Discoveries the same colour as mine, but you know, I like green, and I wanted a TDI. It's a little damp at the top of the Mamakus. That's all that's relevant for now, but also 3 door top frames, some external bits, an oil cooler, and some inside bits, including an unbroken centre console with previous owner applied wood grain. So I'm stripping all the stuff off the door, and I'll swap everything over. I could probably use it as is, but the wiring is slightly different. And the stuff that is on my original door is the original stuff, so I'll keep it if it's easy. Plus I do want to swap the lock barrel, which means removing the entire door latch mechanism anyway. Now, I didn't notice when I chose this door that the underside was a little damaged. So I did have to make a quick repair. It's not a perfect panel repair, but it's fine for now. You can't see this on the vehicle, but if I really feel like it, I'll redo this with fresh metal when I paint the door blue. Presumably that will happen one day.
Alright, so that's the door ready to go. I've pulled the wiring loom completely out because this one is a little different from the one on my vehicle. I don't have the high mount stoplight. And that means I'm going to have to change the glass out at some point. But that's a problem for later.
So, fitting the door. I had a friend visiting and I took the opportunity of help and quickly swapped the doors over. It was a little chaotic.
Down on here. Next to put it on the fuck back.
I'll help put the door.
Well, as you can see, the boot door is on. successful. And the only minor problem is that I snapped 2 of the bolts off inside the vehicle. But aside from that, it's on, it swings well, it seals all the way around, although I do want to lift it a bit higher. But I don't want to get bogged down worrying about that now. Let's move on to the next problem.
The rear bumper. You'll note that it's missing.
Well, here it is, I have it, out in the al fresco workshop, and it's a little bent up. I was intending to just buy another one, but trying to find the pre-facelift bumper in good condition is pretty difficult. So I'm going to have to fix the one I've got, and I'll show you what the main problem is. Well, first of all, it's a little dented up. We can fix that, that's not a problem. What's more of a problem is that this whole top edge has been pushed down from somebody jumping on it, I guess. And the reason this is more of a problem than just how it looks is because when it's on the vehicle, something like this, it sits too far below the surface.
The problem isn't so much that it is low, but that it is dented. So the dented areas are low, and there is a piece of plastic trim that covers the gap between the bumper and the body. But because the bumper isn't flat, the plastic trim isn't supported along its whole edge, and my one has been smashed to pieces.
You can see how this piece of plastic trim sits against the bumper and pretty much follows the shape of it. Whereas on the other side, where the gorilla was jumping, it doesn't follow the shape of the bumper at all. In fact, there's a huge gap at this edge. So I need to somehow bring this edge this way, which is easier said than done because this is a pretty heavy section of steel. Is that concrete? Okay, here we are, all stripped. So there's a significant dent here and here. Those are hopefully pretty easy to take care of. What I'm more concerned about is the overall shape. To help figure that out, I made this gauge. And this is a pretty good fit at this end. And if I move this along to about here, make sure it's tight on the bottom, you can see I have a gap at the top and terrible along here.
To cut a long story short, I can't unbend the steel. It's 2.5mm thick and I can't unbend it without more leverage. So I gave up on the bumper for the time being because I really didn't know what to do.
So I've been thinking about it for a few days now. I need to make some sort of device to sort of hold it down and give me a lot more leverage. To be honest, I really don't know exactly what that's... No, come on. No, we're not doing that. Ah.
Well, apparently things got desperate, and now we're cutting the bumper apart. Let's rewind a bit and see how we got here. Alright, so I decided to cut out the bent top face of the bumper and replace it with new steel. Maybe that's a good idea or a bad idea, don't know yet. Otherwise I'd have to find a replacement bumper anyway, so there's really nothing to lose. I'm cutting the new top from 2mm thick steel. Unfortunately, I don't have a full sheet to make this from, so I will end up with a join. The original bumper is 2.5mm thick, and if I had 2.5mm thick steel, I'd be using that. But you'll see that I'm going to do something a bit different that'll more than compensate. Now, the million-dollar question is this line in the right place? Is this right at the tangent of this arc? And this is where we rejoin the story, and the point of no return. Well, I guess there's no going back now. Now, you might be able to see within the ink line there is a scribed line, and that perfectly matches the panel. So I'm grinding back to the scribed line as exactly as possible because I want a tight joint. If the panel is a tight fit, it's going to help reduce the amount of pulling I get when I tack weld it. A little bit. It's not going to sit perfectly yet because there's nothing holding it up, but I think our line looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to have to take a little bit off this edge here, probably because this wasn't attached perfectly straight. Just a little bit. Okay, I think that's pretty good for now. It's a bit hard to get it perfect with everything being so floppy. Okay, the reason I was being so careful about trying to get everything sitting right at this stage is because I have to drill the holes to mount this. And I need that to be pretty accurate so that this thing sits hard against the face of the bumper. So, my plan is to drill through the holes in the original panel. That'll put all 8 holes in the right place relative to each other, but I still need to carefully position them all together. The holes in this black plastic cover don't exactly line up perfectly with the factory holes. Okay, I think that'll be fine. All I'm worried about is that it sits in the right place in this direction. Well, these 2 pieces of galvanized angle are my secret ingredient. This piece of steel is 2 millimeters thick. The original bumper was made from 2.5 millimeter thick steel. And the original bumper dented when somebody stood on it, so presumably this 2 millimeter thick stuff would fare even less well. Which is why I'm going to stiffen this edge with the 2 pieces of angle iron. Now, one piece, I'm placing them on top, obviously they will go underneath. One piece is probably sufficient to stop this bending, but 2 pieces will get this thickness all the way out to here. So I've only got this small amount of thinner steel left. Okay, galvanized steel. The only reason I'm using galvanized angle is because I bought it from Bunnings and they only sell steel in these small galvanized lengths, for people to use in their garden or whatever. I didn't plan ahead enough to order real steel. And yes, I am aware of the fact that welding galvanized steel is a health hazard. The difficult part about this mini bumper project is that all of the welding will be unrestrained. I don't have a thick, heavy welding table large enough to clamp any of this down. Well, I don't have a welding table full stop. Anyway, we're going to make a lot of bananas, and just have to deal with that as we go. First example, the top of the T is now convex. That's because there's more metal on this side, so it contracted less. The solution is to add more weld. Okay, so here's the situation. I still have a little bit of a bow this way. I'll see if I can show you. If I lay a straight edge across here, the gap is about 5 millimeters at each end. I think before I worry about that, let's cut this to the actual length so the problem doesn't look worse than it is.
So this top edge, it's more convex than I would like. Now if it was a little bit higher in the middle, say 1 or 2 millimeters, I'd probably leave it, because all of the welding we're going to do from now on is along this top edge, so it's only going to pull the ends straighter. It's not going to go the other way. However, it might not move much at all. So I want to get it a little bit straighter than it is, because it'll be really hard for me to correct this direction once the bumper's all welded back together. Okay, how do we do? Oh yeah, that's pretty good. There's maybe a millimeter or two at each end, which is ideal, I think. Good, let's move on. Next, I need to make clearance for these rivet holes. Oh, I've just seen a bit of a problem in this plan.
So originally when I measured everything up, I was planning to use 30mm angle. Instead I went with 25 because that's what Bunnings sell. And I've just realised that that puts the centre of the T perilously close to where I need to cut clearance for rivets. Anyway, luckily it's fine. So long as I position the T right on the back edge of the top panel, it'll work.
Well, my hole drilling wasn't completely accurate, but it doesn't really matter, it's just clearance for these. Just the back end of these, like so. I don't think there's anything else to procrastinate on. Let's get this tacked to this. So that's that welded. As you can see, I've just done the odd stitch weld. I don't see any reason to weld it more than that. Now in terms of straightness, how did we do? Well, that welding did move it quite a bit, and we've ended up with a low spot in the middle. What I can do is just put a couple of welds along this edge, and that'll pull it back straight. Okay, well, that didn't do much at all, so we can be a bit more aggressive. Oh yeah, okay. All right. I think it's pretty much ready to go. I do have a couple of low spots, minor low spots, but overall it's dead straight. Well, it's the next morning. It's a nice clear day, just above freezing, so it's a little fresh in the workshop right now. Now, this weld produced two problems, one of which I've already solved. The first thing it did was cup the middle. That's because the weld is a gentle curve, and when you do that, this panel is always going to move downwards. I've already corrected that with a comical amount of welding along the bottom of this angle. Obviously now that this is a rigid structure, it takes quite a bit more to correct any warping. So that problem is solved. This is nice and straight. The next problem, you can see on each end, our top panel has overall sunk down at the back. Now, I did anticipate this to an extent and had it clamped at either end, but that just wasn't enough. There's an awful lot of force in this fold here, and it's simply pulled this down regardless. Now, this is going to be a little bit difficult to fix. As per the initial problem with this bumper, there's no way I can use manpower to unbend this fold at all. On the inside, this bumper has these two stiffening gussets. Currently they're not welded to this top panel because, well, obviously we just put this on. So what I can do to bring this way is basically wedge something into this top gap. And I've made a couple of crude steel wedges just for this. So let's see how it goes. That is pretty good. That is exactly where we want to be. Check the other side. That is okay, sort of. The thing is, on this side, I can feel that I've just made a high spot. It has pulled this whole thing up quite a bit, but there's also a high spot. The other thing, which I haven't checked yet, but I assume is occurring, we now have a low spot in the middle. No, we don't. Excellent. Okay, well that means that the stiffness in these two pieces of angle is enough to pull the middle up with these 2 points. Perfect. I thought I was going to have to do a lot of work to get around that. Now the ends aren't a problem. I can just pull these ends up and weld them in place. That'll be fine. They're just a little bit out now. However,
As it sits, there's an awful lot of tension in this steel, and it would be better if it was relaxed. So I'm going to attempt to relieve the tension in the fold with fire. Heat the metal up and let it relax into the shape that it is now. I'm limited to this map torch, which probably won't do anything, but we may as well see what happens.
now, I don't really think that did anything at all, but let's have a look. If I push these two wedges out now, and it doesn't spring back as much as it did before, then we did something. Let's find out. I've got no real reason to push these out, by the way, I'm just curious. You know what? Well, there's a gap there, and there wasn't when we started. I think this other side was a little tighter, so let's see what happens down here. Oh, and we have a pretty decent gap down here too, so that did help. In fact, that's probably done what we need it to do. All right, so I'm going to reinstall the wedges. This isn't sitting completely where I want it. It's probably halfway between where we started and where it is with the wedges in place. And I think this amount of weld is perfectly sufficient. Although Land Rover did fully weld them, so maybe I should too. I'll think about that one. I am perilously close to running out of gas, so I don't want to do any welding I don't have to. It just means I have to make a trip to the gas guy. A little bit of crap coming out. I think I've still got gas. That's it. Definitely out of gas now. Ugh. Okay, we are done. Turned out about as good as I could hope, I think. I guess we'll see what it looks like when it's all painted up. But at this point, I don't think I could have done much better. Pat on the back myself.
This is epoxy, left over from the Series 3 chassis. The bumper will need some filler, the top surface is probably okay, but there are a couple of dents in the face that I did hit with a hammer a few times, but they still need work. And I haven't decided what the top coat will be yet, but this epoxy does need a top coat, so I will have to sort that out soon. Rather than stand around contemplating minuscule differences in sheen levels between different black paints, I think I'm going to test fit the rear bumper. Okay. Now both of these rear corners need replacing. The texture is completely buggered on it, and somebody's put some nasty brush paint or something over the top. But let's see how they go on the bumper. Oh yeah, like a glove. Now, I would quite like to drive this Land Rover again. And I did find a bunch of cables under the bonnet that I had unplugged, that I have now replugged. So maybe I don't have to put the dashboard back in to get it started. Well, let's find out. We've got the other service vehicle this time, just as reliable as all my other vehicles. Ah. Hopefully that's close enough. How can you have a flat battery? You're plugged in. Okay, let's go again. Okay, let's try again. I did check, we do have ignition. Not necessarily sparking, but we have ignition. We may not have fuel. This is fuel injected, electronic fuel injection, and it's possible with everything unplugged that the car just isn't injecting fuel. Why is it not jump starting? Okay, well we have 14.5 volts on the jumper leads and about 12 across the terminals, so let me get a wire brush. Okay, that's better. Let's try and start this thing. Okay, confidence level high. Nothing.
just going to turn the other car off, leave it connected, and see if we can hear the fuel pump. Okay, listen carefully. Nothing, I don't think. Okay, the fuel pump is working. I used this power supply to power it up for a second. Here, I'll try and show you. It's a little awkward, but listen up. Okay. So the fuel pump is working, we have ignition, it's just that the car doesn't know what to do. Which is understandable, considering half the car is disconnected. Alright, here comes the dashboard. Now I think I've actually solved the mystery already. There was a blue plug on the passenger side under the dashboard which was disconnected. I've reconnected that now, and that wiring loom runs all the way over to the back of the vehicle, and I think it probably contains the feed for the fuel pump. Easy. Hey. How do you do both directions at once? Oh no! One of the plugs is somehow jammed down here. How did that happen? How did these... Oh. Arse. Ah, that'll do for now. Ah, lucky I'm not a truck driver. Ah, that'll do. All right, confidence level maximum. Let's go, Land Rover. Ah, frog snacks. Come on, Land Rover, let's go. Confidence level maximum. Ah, these battery terminals are really painful. Rain's starting to come in. Now would be a good time to start. Okay. This time, confidence level supreme. Let's go. Ah! Okay, have a rest. Have a rest, it's okay. Hiluxes don't start first time either. All right, let's go. Okay. Another rest. Just recharge. We'll do this. Okay, rain's pretty steady now. Come on. I believe in you. This time. Interesting. We've either lost the starter or we've lost the starter, I think. Oh, there it goes. I don't really know what to say. It was supposed to just work. Suppose I better cover you up since you got no windows. Great. Toyotas have windows.
And this is the sad ending of this episode. I don't know why it's not firing properly. Don't get me wrong, we will figure this out. But not on this day. Sometimes things just don't go the way they're supposed to. Nope, we're not giving up yet. And this is pretty simple. We're either not getting fuel into the engine or we don't have any spark. Because this was running when I parked it, so I know that there's no major issues with the engine or the timing or anything like that. My suspicion is that we have an electrical fault somewhere, probably a bad earth, that's stopping either the ignition or the injection from working properly. Now, in addition to the non-running problem, at the end of yesterday, I also lost the starter motor. Hopefully the starter motor just isn't getting power for whatever reason. The first thing I'm going to do is sort out these annoying battery terminals. Both of these terminals are buggered. Look, I can probably just pull this one off if I jiggle it. Yeah. That's because gorillas have over-tightened these terminals without them being fully down. And then they become a cone. You can probably see that the base of this terminal is really nasty. I don't know what somebody's been doing. They've been jabbing it with something. Probably jumper leads, actually. Anyway, let's see if we can clean that up a little bit. I'm just trying to knock off the high spots so that we can push the terminal fully down. If it's too tapered, I'll put a shim around the top. But we'll see. And I'll spray a little contact cleaner in here too. And for some reason, mankind has yet to figure out what size battery terminal nuts actually are. So today I'm going with 9/16, which doesn't fit at all, but neither does 13mm or 1/2 inch. And I'm just using the screwdriver to spread the clamp apart so that it drops all the way down. It's a little tighter than it should be. Okay, now that is fully seated. See how these are now sitting below the top of the post? So they're not trying to squeeze themselves off anymore. Now, we definitely don't have enough battery to start the engine, but hopefully there's enough in it just to see if it'll try and turn the engine over, because yesterday when the starter stopped working, it was like a switch was turned off. So if it tries to crank, it means we don't have that problem anymore. Okay, here we go. Oh, good battery. All right. Yeah, I suspect yesterday afternoon it stopped cranking because the negative terminal came loose. Anyway, back to our original problem, the engine doesn't run. I'm attaching an inline spark tester. I can hear that the engine is trying to fire, but this will let us see visually if the spark is consistent. Okay, just keep an eye out down here. We'll see if it sparks. Hopefully I have enough battery for 1 or 2 more cranks. All right, here we go. I saw sparkles. Not very good sparkles. I don't know if you guys saw that with the frame rate of the camera and everything, but we definitely had a couple of sparks. I had my head poking around the corner and I could see them with my bare eyes. So that's not a problem. Before trying to test fuel pressure and injectors and all of that, I'm just going to give it another crank. I'm hooked up to the other vehicle anyway, so why not? The only thing I've done apart from clean the battery terminals is clean up the terminals on the coil and tighten the connections a little bit. Okay, here we go. All right. Whoa, 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 whoa. Well, it runs. Whew. Apparently it runs fast. I've no idea why it took off like a rocket. I'm just going to leave this hooked up for 5 or 10 minutes while I have a cup of tea, get some charge in the battery, and then yeah, we'll probably start it again and see if it takes off again. If it does, we'll have to try and figure that out, I guess. Ah, what a day. The sun is shining, 10 degrees, cake, tea, black of course, BMW exhaust fumes, and the Land Rover works again.
Hopefully. Hopefully it still works. Okay, I think that should be enough. I'll just get the service vehicle out of the way. Way out of the way. Oh, and the reason it ran away when we started it was because this throttle linkage was snagged. It was hooked up like this. I must have knocked it while I was doing rust repair up here. Believe it or not, there was rust in here. Hopefully it starts. It was pretty dumb of me to take the service vehicle away before I started it, but hopefully there's enough juice in the battery for one crank. Let's go. Confidence level, maximum. Yes. Holy moly, how many rippums are we doing? About 1,500. Okay, I guess. Hopefully that drops down. I'm just going to go check the throttle linkage. Okay, that idle is way too high. I'll check the manual. I'll see if there's an idle adjustment we can make. Obviously the computer controls the idle, but there might be something external we can do. Fixed it. Don't know what I did exactly, but it's purring like a kitten. Lazy kitten, but and quite loud for a cat. It's running smooth, that's what I'm saying. I did take the bypass valve out. Now this lets extra air into the engine when it's needed, so that could definitely cause our fast idle. There didn't appear to be anything wrong with it. I just took it out. Looked okay. Put some new sealant on the threads, stuck it back in, and well, you can see the vehicle idles perfectly fine now. Okay, I guess I should bolt the seat back in. That's exciting.